Hilchos Chametz Umatzah Perek Revi'i, the laws of Chametz and Matzah, chapter 4. Today we're going to talk about two primary verses in the Torah that tell us about the prohibition of owning Chametz. And they're both up here on the screen. One says, V'lo yira'eh lecha Chametz, v'lo yira'eh lecha se'or b'chol gevulecha. Neither Chametz, which is actual leavened products, or se'or, which is yeast, a leavening agent, shall be seen in all of your border, in all of your property. So we have a couple of key words here. First, the Torah is using the word v'lo yira'eh, should not be seen. Second, it's saying lecha, twice. It cannot be seen by you. Your chametz is the implication, as we'll soon see in the Rambam. And it says b'chol gevulecha, your entire property, not just your home. Contrast that with the second verse, and again, both of these are not the full verses, they're just quotes that are relevant to us. Shivat yamim, for 7 days, se'or lo yimatzeh bevatechem. Leavening agents, chametz, shall not be found in your homes. So here we have the word shall not be found versus you shall not see. It can't even be found, so even if it's invisible, it can still be found. And the word is bevatechem, in your homes. Not in your entire property, in your homes. So the Rambam in the beginning of this chapter is going to examine the parameters of what these words tell us. Chametz cannot be seen, chametz cannot be found in your entire property, just in your homes. There are different cases. We'll talk about chametz owned by a Jew in the hands of a non-Jew, chametz of a non-Jew in the hands of a Jew. That's going to be the topic for today. So here we go. Aleph, Kasuv b'Torah. It says in the Torah, Lo yira'eh lecha chametz. Chametz shall not be seen for you. Yochel, this might lead to a mistaken conclusion. If I were to hide my chametz, or I were to deposit, entrust it, my chametz, into the hands of an idol-worshipping Gentile, perhaps I would not transgress. After all, the chametz is not seen by me. I've either hidden it, so you can't see it, or I've given it away. Talmud loymar, therefore we have a second verse that comes to teach us the following law. Leaven cannot be found in your homes. Even if I entrust it or I bury it. The operative word over here is lo yimatzeh. It cannot be found. Versus the lo yira'eh, which would actually imply just seeing. Here, lo yimatzeh tells us it cannot even be found. Now, what do we do about the fact that it says in your homes? How does this verse include a case of entrusting? If you entrust the chametz, now it's no longer in your homes. So the commentaries say that's actually part of what the Rambam is trying to tell us. When you entrust chametz to somebody else, it's considered to be in your home, because the laws governing the watchman's responsibility makes it as though he's watching it in your home. Now, the Rambam goes with the flip side. If we would only have the second verse, Yochel, one might think, Lo yi'oiver eloim kein haya hachametz bebeisai, that a person only transgresses if the chametz is in his home. Avolim haya rachek mi beisai, but if the chametz was far from his home, basadai be'ir acheres, perhaps in the field or in another city, lo yi'oiver, maybe then he will not transgress the prohibition. Talmud leimar. Therefore, if you go back to the first verse, it says that the Torah teaches us with the words b'chol gevulecha, in your entire border, b'chol rishutecha, in all of your possessions. One might be led to think, with the sum total of both verses, that perhaps a Jew is also obligated to destroy mirshusai, from his own possession, chametz shel akum oy shel hekdesh, somebody else's chametz, chametz belonging to a non-Jew, chametz belonging to the holy temple that was consecrated. Talmud leimar, here's where we have the blue exact word there. The precision in the wording is lo yira'eh lecha. Chametz shall not be seen for you. Shelcha iyataraya. You cannot see your own chametz. Aval ataraya shel acherim oy shel gavaya. But you are permitted to see. In other words, to have in your possession and be able to see chametz belonging to others, or chametz belonging to the Most High, belonging to the Holy Temple. So what turns out is that the idea is not so much that chametz shouldn't be in your property, but that your chametz shouldn't be in your property. And your chametz also shouldn't be on other people's property. But if somebody else's chametz is on your property, that's okay. And therefore the Rambam summarizes it in the following way. Beis, halamadata, here you learn. Shehachametz shel Yisrael, that chametz belonging to a Jew, If he left it in his own property, afilu tamun, va'afilu be'ir acheres, va'afilu mufkad bi'adakum, even if it's not seeable, it's hidden, it's in a different city, it's entrusted in the hands of an idol-worshipping Gentile, a non-Jew, a person transgresses, is held liable on account of both commandments, not seeing the chametz and not finding it. Chametz shel hektish, ay shel akum, shahaya etzel Yisrael. Conversely, if the chametz belonged to somebody else, it was consecrated, or it belonged to a non-Jew, and it was found by a Jew over Pesach, afilu haya imoy babayis, even if it was with him in his home, the chametz is sitting in your living room. It's permitted, because the chametz doesn't belong to you. Now we'll see in a moment in the next halacha that there are some conditions where you will be liable, and that is if you accepted responsibility for the chametz. In other words, if the chametz gets lost, you're going to replace it, then it becomes like your own. But here we're talking about a default case. You didn't take responsibility for the chametz, it's simply sitting in your home. Then there are no limitations. It could even be, again, in your living room, and it's allowed. Even if it wasn't an idol-worshipping Gentile. A resident alien, we call it. A ger toshav means a non-Jew who accepted upon himself to abide by the 7 Noahide laws. The Jewish hand, the Jewish authority, does have rulership over him. And so one might think perhaps we should treat him like a Jew. No, says the Rambam. We do not force the Jew, in other words, the cases where the resident alien deposited chametz by a Jew. We don't force the Jew to remove such chametz from his possession on Pesach. Other texts have the word ein koifin oisei lohoitzi chametz mirshusenu by Pesach. We don't force the Gentile, the resident alien, to take his chametz out of our homes. Point is, you don't have to get rid of such chametz. Avol tzarich lasos mechitza gvoya asara tvachim b'fnei chametz shalakum. What you do have to do is put up a fence. You have to put up a partition at least 10 tvachim tall, about 30, 40 inches tall, in front of the chametz belonging to the non-Jew. Shema yaveli histapik imenu, for a different concern. Perhaps you might come to use it. Chametz is such a usual food in your house all year. If you see a box of cereal, you won't think to yourself twice, it belongs to a non-Jew. Fine, but I'll have some breakfast. And you may end up eating chametz on Pesach. So while you're allowed to have it in your home, you have to put up the partition. Aval shel hektish, but says the Rambam, if the chametz was consecrated, it belonged to the temple, you don't even need a partition. Because there's a basic principle that everybody separates themselves from holy stuff. We had this a little yesterday also. Everybody's aware of things that are holy. They don't touch it. There's a whole prohibition involved in that. In the 8th book of the Rambam, the final set of laws is called Hilchot Mi'ilah, the laws of sacrilege, misusing holy objects. So there's a prohibition involved there. So nobody would come to use this chametz because they know it belongs to hektish. Because everybody separates themselves, disassociates themselves from things that are consecrated, so they do not transgress the prohibition of me'ilah, again, of sacrilege. Let's get a little more into the details here. You have an idol-worshipping Gentile, a non-Jew, deposited his chametz by a Jew. And we said that the baseline is that it's allowed. Says the Rambam, Im kibel alav Yisrael achrayis, if the Jew accepted responsibility for the chametz, sheim avad nigna v'shalom le'damav, that were the chametz to be lost or stolen, he would pay restitution. He would repay him, reimburse him for the worth of the chametz. Harei zechayav levaray. Now the Jew becomes obligated to destroy this chametz before Pesach because it's basically his. Since you took responsibility for it, it becomes like yours. Only if you did not take responsibility for the chametz, are you allowed to keep it by you. Not only that, you could even eat it after Pesach, because the entire time it's considered to be in the possession of the non-Jew. Typically, we said a few times already in these chapters that if Jewish chametz stays existing over Pesach, not destroyed after Pesach, it's forbidden to derive benefit from it. Over here, you have chametz in the hands of a Jew. But since it belonged to a non-Jew, and the Jew never took responsibility for it, so after Pesach, it's also permitted. Says the Rambam Dalit, Akum Anos. If you have a terrorist, for lack of better words, a non-Jew who forces his way on people, Shehifkid Chametz Yetzel Yisrael. He deposited his chametz by the Jew. And over here, since he is basically a terrorist, so it's not just enough for the Jew to say whether he accepts responsibility or not. You have to know what the terrorist is thinking. If the Jew is aware that if he's going to lose or have the chametz stolen, the non-Jew is going to force him to pay it back, he'll blackmail him, he'll do whatever it takes, he'll force his way on him and make him pay. So then, even if he didn't verbally accept responsibility, when Pesach comes, the Jew has to get rid of this chametz. It's considered as if it's yours, since you know that this terrorist will require you to pay up and take responsibility for it if it gets lost. So here, we don't make the differentiation of the last halacha. Whether or not you accept the responsibility, you have to treat it as though you did. Hey, Yisrael shehirhin chametzoi etzel ha'akum. A Jew deposits his chametz by a non-Jew as a security, as a collateral against the loan. So the non-Jew lent the Jew money, and the Jew doesn't have any cash on hand. So he says, listen, take my chametz. And typically when you give security, what you say is basically, if I don't pay up by a certain day, you can have the possession, the collateral that I'm giving you. So the question now is, does this chametz stay in the Jew's property, since it's his? Or do we treat it as already becoming the non-Jew's because it's a collateral against the loan? So the Rambam says it depends what wording the Jew used when he handed over the chametz. Im amar loy, if the Jew said, Im loy hevesi lechamois mikan va'ad yoim pleini, knei chametz zeh me'achshav, if I don't pay up the money loan that I owe you by a certain date, and the date has to be before Pesach, as the Rambam will immediately say. But if he says, if I don't pay up the chametz, you are going to acquire this, if I don't pay up the money, you are going to acquire this chametz from today. In other words, the transfer of ownership technically begins right now. It's just contingent on the fact that the Jew won't pay up the loan. So then, the moment the Jew makes that verbal stipulation, the chametz changes hands and it goes onto the authority of the non-Jew. And then, after Pesach, the Jew can benefit from such chametz. But who, as I just said, that's provided that the date by which the collateral will actually change hands is before Pesach. But if you didn't use that operative word, if you didn't say that the chametz is going to be yours retroactively from now, so then, in truth, it turns out that this chametz is only to be treated as a deposit in the hands of the non-Jew. Contingent on the fact that the Jew may or may not pay up the loan, it may later change hands. But no change of hands is occurring now. And therefore, it's always forbidden to derive benefit from it after Pesach. Even if, the commentaries say, even if the date that it actually changes hands is before Pesach. Vav Yisrael va'akum shayu bayin bisfina. If a Jew and a non-Jew were traveling by ship, and the Jew had chametz in his hand, and it came the 5th hour of Erev Pesach, the 14th of Nisan, and he has to get rid of his chametz. What do? There's nowhere to go. You're on a ship. One may sell the chametz to the non-Jew or give it to him as a complete gift, and then go back and rebuy it, repurchase it after Pesach. Of course, it's provided that you're actually giving it away. In your mind, you're literally ridding yourself of the ownership. This is actually one of the sources for today's widespread custom that we sell our chametz. There's no way we can destroy all of our chametz. So much of it is full of preservatives. It's going to last for a long time. Why would we throw it away? And so we all sell our chametz, although it's a very complicated sale, and therefore, of course, it must be done through a rabbi. There's no selling your chametz on your own. You can't call your non-Jewish neighbor and arrange your own sale. There's a very specific way that it has to be done, and that's why today that's what we do. We give power of attorney to the rabbi, and the rabbi on the day before Pesach has the non-Jew that he has designated, and they do the sale, all in accordance with Jewish law. Zayin, Omer Yisrael la'akum, a Jew can tell a non-Jew, Ad sha'ato leikeach b'moneh boi v'kach b'masayim, rather than buy just one money. It's like about $100. That's 100 zuz in those days. So think about it as $100. Instead of buying $100 worth of food, come and buy $200 worth of food. Essentially, he wants the non-Jew to buy his chametz from him. You're about to go to the store. I see you're about to buy $100 worth. Okay? I'll give you $200 worth for the same money. Or you say, instead of buying from a non-Jewish friend, come buy from a Jewish guy. And when you say this statement, you add the words, Shema et starich ve'ekach mimcha achara Pesach. Perhaps I'm going to need the merchandise back, and perhaps I may buy it back after Pesach. So here, since you didn't clearly state your intention to buy back the chametz after Pesach, if the non-Jew does go ahead and buy your chametz from you, he did it on his own accord, and you've gotten rid of your chametz, you have no responsibility for it. You're good. But you cannot sell or give the gift with an outright stipulation. Hey, buy it now, I'll buy it back later. No promises. If you did so, you've violated the prohibition of not seeing or finding chametz. Because literally you have your chametz sitting in the non-Jew's hand. You told him it's only holding it for a couple of days. Afterwards, I'm going to buy it back. It's always remained yours. Ches, ta'areves chametz, a mixture that contains chametz. One transgresses the prohibition of having chametz on his property if you have such a mixture on your property. Hamurias, like a certain type of brine, the kutach habavli, the Babylonian kutach, who remembers that from a couple of days ago? Very special recipe, moldy sour milk, moldy bread, mineral salts. B'sheichar hamadi median beer, which is made with flour and therefore chametz. Anything similar, things that are edible, fit for human consumption, they have chametz mixed into them, you can't have it on your property. But something which has a mixture of chametz into it, and it's not fit for eating, one may keep it in his property on Pesach. Ketzad, what would be an example of that? Says the Rambam halacha test. Ketzad, a tanner's bowl, or they have a tanner's trough. That you put into it flour and hides. Even if you put in this mixture 1 hour before the time that chametz is meant to be destroyed, you can keep it all Pesach. Even though there's flour mixed into it and the mixture here is chametz, but whatever mixture is created in a tanner's trough isn't fit for human consumption. So you can keep it. But if you didn't put the hides, you only put the flour mixed into the water or whatever it is, so then it depends. If you put the flour in more than 3 days before the time chametz is meant to be destroyed, muter l'kaimai, you can keep it. By the time 3 days later comes around, all the flour and water mixture has become completely spoiled and rotten and not fit for human consumption. But if you put the flour in and there are no hides yet, within 3 days before the time of chametz meant to be destroyed, you have to destroy this mixture as well, because within 3 days, it's fit for human consumption so long as you didn't put in the hides. Yud v'chein, so too, hakiloir, an eye salve, v'haratia, and a compress, v'ha'ispalanis, and another type of bandage. The hatiriak. Tiriak is a medical type of potion. It's actually online. You search it up. It's called theriac or theriaka, a very, very ancient Greek mixture of medicine. The Ramban, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimonides mentions it in his commentary on the Torah. He says it contained meat from dead animals and dead scorpion, viper's flesh, some leaven, some honey. So it had a whole bunch of stuff. It could also have chametz. The word theriac actually means of animals, relating to animals. So in many of the recipes, even in the Talmud when it's mentioned, according to some commentaries, mention the idea of having animal meat in this mixture. It had eggs, whatever, a whole medical potion. The point is, if in any of these eye salves or compresses or bandages or medicine mixtures, if you put chametz into it, muter l'kaiman b'Pesach. You're allowed to keep them on Pesach. Because the image, the form of the chametz gets lost in the mixture of the potion that you're making. And so it's not considered fit anymore for eating, and you're allowed to keep it on Pesach. Yud Aleph, hapas atzma she'ipsa, v'nifsla melech ala kelev, actual bread, if it became moldy, and disqualified even from a dog eating it. Umalugma she'nisrecha, or a compress, another type of medical concoction that became spoiled. Ein tzarich levar, one must not destroy it before Pesach. Begadim she'kib soesan b'chalev chita, clothes that were washed with starch, wheat starch. V'chein neyaris she'dib koesan b'chametz, or papers that were glued together with material containing chametz. V'chol kayetze, but anything like it, muter l'kaim b'Pesach, can also be kept on Pesach. Ve'ein bahen mishum le'yirav le'yimatzeh, they don't have anything on account of seeing or finding chametz. She'ein suras hachametz emedes, because the form of the chametz does not last. Yud beis davar shenis'ariv b'chametz. Ve'ein ma'achol adam klal, something which had chametz mixed into it, but it is not a food for any person. Oy she'ein ma'achol kol adam, or it isn't the food for most people. Kegoin hatiriak v'chayetze, again that theriac, and something like it. Afal pisha muter l'kaimai. Even though we just said in the last halacha that you're allowed to keep it on Pesach, of course asur le'ochloi ad achar Pesach. You cannot eat it until after Pesach. The license to keep is not a license to eat. Even if the tiniest amount is what it contains. There's literally no chametz in there. It's still forbidden to eat. The commentaries talk about what about using it as a remedy. So for a remedy, the commentaries make a distinction here. If the chametz inside it is fit for human consumption, then you can only use it in case of a danger to human life, pikuach nefesh. But if the chametz itself is not fit for consumption, so then if you're using it for a remedy, then such a mixture would be allowed to be eaten on Pesach.